Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. Hey, I want to ask you something before I get into today's conversation. And that is, have you ever looked at the life you're trying so hard to build and realize you don't want to keep building it in the same way anymore? You still care, you still feel called, you haven't given up, but something in you has changed, and now the pace, the pressure, the proving, the version of success you once chased just still does not sit with you the same way. And that's where I've been lately. And honestly, there's a version of ambition I don't think I can stomach anymore. And I want to be careful with how I say that because I still care about purpose. I still care about calling. I still care about impact and legacy and building something meaningful with the life that God has given me. I still care about my work, my family, my future, my health, my faith, my peace, and the woman I'm becoming on the other side of everything this past year has required from me. But I don't hear the hustle message the same way anymore. It literally brings me to a point of sigh. And so I don't hear that message the way it used to. It used to put a fire under my butt, and I was just so driven. But that hustle, I don't hear that sleep when it's done and feel inspired, or I don't hear it in saying, what if life is happening right now? I don't hear it and think, if you want it badly enough, you'll have to sacrifice something or everything and feel motivated about it. I hear it and wonder when everything became an acceptable price to pay for success. And that's where I think is the turning point for me, just in the season and in my life that I'm at what point does the hustle have to be ambition? And ambition has to be the goal. And when we're striving and chasing after something, why does it have to cost us anything? And I think that's the point that today's episode is all about, is wondering when everything became an acceptable price to pay for success. Because there was a time when I understood what was out there in the space, and I think I took some pride into those things. And we adopt and adapt these different languages and words to identify us, to give us this momentum or identity or feeling that fuels us forward. And as faith-fueled women, that's where I had a pause, because I'm like, well, maybe it's not the world's way of doing this, but maybe it's the faith that fuels me. And where is my faith right now? So I think that using some of those languages to narrate our stories and the things that we tell us and about ourselves that keep us driven and keep going. And I knew how to keep going. I knew how to push through, I knew how to perform, and knew how to produce under pressure, keep showing up when I was already running on those fumes. And I recognized that as the season of burnout. And I know we've talked about burnout many times on this podcast, but there's a different kind of burnout that isn't talked about enough in these online spaces and places and communities. They're talking about burnout for the physical exertion. But what we talk about on the show is the deep, soulful burnout where your whole body comes crumbling down as a nervous system response, overstimulating and overloading and oversensation of what this world is trying to push, force, corral, and drive us to do, when we don't take it into account how we actually rest and preserve our faith-fueled energy, time, resources, gifts, talents, abilities, and skills. How are we stewarding them for the best possible use that God has called and equipped us for? That's the kind of burnout I'm talking about. Because when I hit that rock bottom burnout, I tell you, man, there's no coming back from that just from catching up on a weekend sleep or making sure we get 8+ hours and drinking our green juices and doing our exercises. No, I'm literally talking about a burnout that doesn't require you to do more. So when I was showing up on these fumes and I'm just burnt out, exhausted, that's how I knew that I just couldn't keep going. I couldn't get through this next thing. And that's to the point where we talk about this sigh. It's this whole combination of, I just can't keep doing this. And that's the moment I finally realized, like, that's my breaking point. That's the point where I could step away and finally actually breathe. And eventually I'd slow down at this point where eventually I'd feel like myself again, right? And then life happened in a way that didn't care about my plans. Because I was on this trajectory to do all those things, I finally recognized, pick my head up out of this driven lane, catch my breath, slow down, and then life. And that's the part we don't always talk about when we talk about burnout. We talk again about full calendars, work stress, poor boundaries, too many obligations, saying yes to all the things. And all of that can be part of it. But sometimes what finally takes you down isn't only the work. Sometimes it's the life you're still trying to carry while you're doing the work. And sometimes it's loss, it's grief, it's fear, it's caregiving to max capacity, it's trauma, it's responsibilities, it's uncertainty, and the emotional weight of having to keep functioning when something inside of you is still trying to understand what the heck just happened. Burnout is not a productivity problem that we can just simply fix with a better routine, a better system, better habits, better sleep. None of that. And so I want to talk about what happens when survival changes the woman you used to be and you're left trying to figure out how to live, lead, work, love, create, and just keep going as someone who may look the same on the outside, but feels completely different underneath. So I've lived through a year that changed me. And I'm not going to give away every detail here because it's just something I'm still figuring out and processing. But I've learned that not everything that is intimate and sacred and private needs a place or belongs in a public conversation. And some things are just still very private. They belong in my journal. They belong in my prayer book. They belong in my inner circle, in my community, with my support group, with my friends, my family. Some of these things, they don't always have to live in this open online public space that we tend to overshare, right? The reservation, the respect, the privacy. And there's just some things that belong to the parts of me that, to be honest, I'm still healing. And I don't need to be handed over to strangers, right? This vulnerability, it can be used against you if you don't have discernment. When we're emotionally in a place, in a space where we tend to live in this online space where we think that oversharing is essential and everything we go through needs to be highlighted and magnified and told because they just won't understand me, right? If you're in that season, find a safe space that is surrounded by people and support that will hold you in a season where you need to be held. And all of that matters because vulnerability without discernment, it can become another form of self-abandonment. I could tell the truth without giving the entire story away, and I could serve through what I've lived without turning every intimate detail into public content or an event. I can let you into the season and these lessons without having to lay every wound on the table. And I encourage you to do the same. And so I'll say it this way. This past year cost me something. It cost me energy I didn't have. It cost me parts of my peace. It cost me time, focus, consistency, health, joy, desire. It cost me relationships. It cost me parts of my identity. And it cost me some of the lightness I used to move through this life with. It changed my relationship with ambition. It changed my relationship with hustle and drive and this pressure to produce and perform. It changed my relationship with work. It changed what I have capacity for. And it changed how I hear people talk about success. It changes everything from how I see the version of myself who used to run on adrenaline and call it drive, to the women in our communities and the women I see online that are still pushing this message and motto. And it breaks my heart because I know there will be a breaking point in their life where it's just not sustainable. And it changed me. And that's one of the harder things to admit, because when you've always been someone who could figure things out, people just naturally expect you to keep figuring things out, not to miss a beat and not to have a setback. Your whole identity and this persona exemplified is that you're the go-getting driven woman who can do it all and be it all and have it all and never crack under pressure. That you have your whole life figured out. That things are just easy peasy. That couldn't be further from the truth. Because behind everyone, behind the facade, behind the social media accounts, behind all of the content we see online, is a broken human still healing from something. Whether you're fully healed in this season, it'll change. And that's just the truth. Is that when we can go to the depths of the lows of our own life, we come out on that side with a greater perspective and a greater depth of understanding for compassion, empathy, healing, humanity. And it's a beautiful gift if it comes full circle. Even though it feels like hell going through it, the pain, the suffering, the struggle, the strife, it's all intended for good when we can learn from the seasons that we're in. This year, it changed me. And so when you've always been the one who shows up and people expect you to keep showing up, when you've built an identity around being strong, capable, articulate, resourceful, helpful, loyal, noble, dependable, it can just feel strange to look yourself in the mirror and realize that version of you that everyone else is used to isn't fully available in the same way anymore. She's gone. And that doesn't mean that she's gone forever, but she's definitely not the same. And neither am I. And I had to come to terms with that. Because I remember someone had said to me once after my brother died, is that I wasn't the same person I was before. And so naturally my response was, well, no shit. And I had to almost laugh it off like, how could I be? Because certain losses split your life into before and after. There's this fulcrum. It's like the AD and BC, right? And you don't need anyone to explain that to you when you've lived it. And you know how the world keeps moving, like everything should just continue. But something inside of you has been completely rearranged. And people may see your face, hear your voice, read your words, listen to your show, and assume that you're interacting with the same woman while you're privately trying to understand and move through this season and figure out who we are now. After losing my father, after living with this fear and responsibility of full-time caregiving to stepping up into these roles and family obligations that I never knew were possible, and then having to put so much aside to take on and take care of who needed me most while I was just barely hanging out for myself. And I could say that I'm not the same woman I was before or even this year. And truth is what matters here because I know I'm not the woman trying to be functional inside of a life that completely changed her. I know I'm not the only one who keeps going while privately feeling like her whole world just got dimmer. And I know I'm not the only one who's lost some sort of the spark, that confidence, that inner light, some of that ease, some of that excitement, and some of the desires to just chase things that used to feel important, used to feel glorifying, like they used to bring me joy. That can feel incredibly lonely, especially when the world around you keeps interacting with this version that they remember. And when you're not showing up as that version anymore, you just feel like you fade away. And there's a loneliness that comes when you've changed on the inside before your outside life has caught up. Your responsibilities may look the same. Your business may still need you. Your family may still need you. Your audience may still expect to hear from you. Your clients still need you to show up. Your bills still arrive. The appointments still happen. The messages still come in. The weekly episode still needs to go out. The work still has to be done and everything continues on. But you're different. And that can feel even more isolating because so much of the weight already sits on your shoulders. And you are the one holding the vision, making the decisions, trying to keep the purpose still alive because you are still passionate about it. And whatever strength that you can gather to do the next right thing, you muster it up, even though you don't complain, but it's just to be honest. And maybe that's a part of what felt so comforting to me lately is that I've spent years building, creating, showing up, encouraging other women, speaking into identity and confidence, talking about freedom, writing books, recording episodes, creating resources, and doing the work. But when grief and survival get into your body, you start to realize the work you've been known for and the woman behind the work aren't always experiencing the same thing at the same time. And so when you can still have something valuable to say and still feel depleted at the same time, you could still be cold and feel tired, and you could still love your work and not have the same capacity as you once used to. And that's okay because you can still believe in what you're building and not want to build it in the expense of your health or the expense of your family, your faith, or even the ability to feel alive once again inside your life. And that's the real tension. And I think that a lot of women are living inside this quietly, secretly, even shamefully, alone. And so the more I have been sharing bits and pieces of my story, my experiences, I've been hearing from so many women as they're echoing, well as validating and assuring. It breaks my heart because I know that there's so much pain that is circulating our community. And it all comes back to how we navigate this season we're in personally, but yet collectively. And so that's the part I keep coming back to. It's this. I'm not trying to get back to who I was, and neither are they. And I think that what I used to want for a while, I kept measuring myself against that old version. And that's the version who thought success required a certain kind of sacrifice. What does it cost me at this point? And I think that was the biggest point is that us as women, we just need to feel safe, secure, and stable. And so we looked at success as a way for us to gain control. And when we've lost control, we lose a sense of our security, stability, and safety. We lose a sense of our identity. And so now, when I think about going back, I could just feel my whole body say, oh no, you're not going there again, Rachel. You are burnt out. We're done chasing. We're done hustling and proving and all the action verbing. Because at this season and time, we're in a place of rest and restoration, of rebuilding, of redefining, of the recovery from our losses. Because we're always talking about the gain, to get more, do more, be more. But on the flip side of that, with every gain is a loss, because we can only carry so much. We can only do so much. We can only have so much until it just becomes too much. As something either drops, it crumbles, it breaks, it fails, or it just disappears. There's only so much limitations and capacities that a human can experience. And I know all of that too much now. And I know what it costs to ignore your body. I know what it costs to keep saying yes when there's nothing left. And I know what it costs to be needed while also needing someone to notice that you're not okay. And I know what it costs to keep building a life that looks meaningful while privately you're feeling so disconnected from the woman who is living it. And I know these parts, the parts of the old me that were never meant to survive the season. And that's, to be honest, that's a hard sentence. That's a hard pill to swallow. But at the same time, it's so freeing. Because maybe this goal isn't to resurrect every part of who I was before life changed me. But maybe the goal is to honor what was beautiful about her, grieve what had to be released, and stop dragging the parts of her survival strategy into a future that needs more truth than performance. And just maybe, that's where freedom begins. It's like you're seeing something different. You see someone chasing something that you used to chase. And then you hear someone else talk about success in a way that you're used to, and it once motivated you. Or maybe you watch someone live at a pace that you once normalized. And you see this striving, this pressure, the proving, the constant output. And instead of feeling jealous or behind, something inside of you just feels tired for them. There's no judgment here. I'm just being aware. Almost like the ghost of Christmas past walking through that room. I was scrolling and I kept seeing all these rooms and they were filled. I remember thinking I was creating those rooms. I was hosting those rooms. I was in those rooms. And my inner existence, my inner intuition, whatever you want to call it, was just like, oh. And I paused for a moment. And I checked in. I was like, what's up? Like, why do you feel that way? And that's when the self-reflection came back. And it just said, all of that cost you so much energy, so much time, so much performance, and so much of being something that we're not in this season. Because I'm not that person. And I don't want to go back to trying to be that person, because I don't want to feel guilty or regret or shame for what was. But how do I live in honor and respect the woman I am now, and lovingly and kindly encourage her that it's okay. It's okay to not want those things anymore. It's okay to leave those rooms. It's okay to step away from places and spaces that you once enjoyed. And in this season, as you continue to find yourself, you start uncovering new things that you enjoy, new interests, new experiences, new places, new friends, new faces, new communities. And maybe it's not that those doors have been closing, but maybe you're being called up. You've outgrown. And sometimes that's the pain of the loss of what once was. Because you worked hard to get into those spaces and places. You worked hard to become the woman you are. And so that's why I say it's like a stranger. There's this strange disconnect, tenderness, this longing for a once was, and in recognizing a version of yourself. And you can respect her and appreciate all of what she had carried and be grateful for her because she got you through these certain seasons. But you don't have to become her again to prove you're still capable and ambitious and valuable and serious about your life or your work. And you don't have to be her again to prove anything to anyone. And that's where I think so many of us get stuck, is that we confuse change capacity with failure. We confuse new desires with giving up and confuse exhaustion with weakness, or confuse that the absence of old ambition with the absence of purpose. But what if your ambition isn't gone? What if it's being refined or redirected? And what if the part of you that's no longer wanting to hustle for your worth, it isn't that you don't care or that you have something less to prove, but it's finally telling you the truth. And what if that version of success that you used to get super excited about and feel so lit for, now it was never meant to hold the weight of who you're becoming? And I'm not asking this in a way for it to necessarily be like a journal prompt or something. I just want you to pause on these questions, just like I had paused on them. And as I was asking myself these deep, meaningful questions, everything was almost like a dang, right. Oh, it was like response with this enthusiasm that was almost giving me permission to say, yeah, you don't have to be stuck here. You don't have to keep living in this past version. You don't have to keep going back to what was. Yeah, maybe it brought you joy, but could that joy sustain where you're at today? Could that excitement, that purpose, that impact, that passion, this drive? I used to thrive off the community. I used to thrive off the energy. But just the thought of being in those rooms is so taxing. It's so tiresome. And I just don't have it in me. And it's not to say that would be forever, but it's for now. Because I think that we're still in the depths of a healing season when we get to these identity places. We know we're not who we were. We're not certain of who we're becoming, because in this journey, it's a constant evolution of becoming. So we've never fully arrived. And I think that when we get into this messy middle, the sticking point of what wasn't to what hasn't, it's about finding joy in this journey, about peace in this pause, about purpose and passion. And that's when we can start letting go of these narratives and these identities and these limitations and these norms and these stories and these expectations. And when we start letting go, because sometimes life forced us to let go, it just ripped the rug right out under you. That's where we begin to find freedom, the freedom to be ourselves, to be curious, to be excited, to be who God is calling us to become. So how do we get to this place where we can start really appreciating life again for what it has, even though life could sometimes feel like it just came on suddenly? You lost the career, you lost the job, you lost the promotion, you lost a family member, you lost a loved one, you lost your identity, you lost pieces of your life, the fabric that wove this DNA of this narrative and this identity of who you once were. And there's a grief element to it. There's a loss element. And yeah, for many, it can feel very traumatic, especially if it just came out of nowhere. And that's where I am. I'm rebuilding from that place. And so I don't, I'm not in a season to be performing. And that's the place where I could say that I have changed and still believe there's more to come. This journey, you never arrive. It's a constant evolution of work, the inner work, because who you were is not who you are. And that's the place where I could say that I don't want to go back, but I can still trust God that He hasn't stopped writing this story. That's why I'm a firm believer that you have the power to create your own story, because the same power that lives in your spirit within you is still writing that script. And that's where you could say that this next version of success or impact or legacy, it's all been rooted in this place of peace and truth and faith and health and family and alignment and your actual living life, your experiences. And so I want to be clear about something, because I don't want this episode to feel like it's an invitation to sit in this heaviness and stay here. I have to preface this to get to the point that I can really say with certainty that I have been in these lows. So I know the value of this high. I know the depths and valleys of life. And so what I want to say is that even though I have changed, and I think for many of us, we have changed. Again, this is constant evolution, especially if you've been with me through this whole podcasting years, then you know life changed me. And so I guess we have to constantly find the light and search. The light may look different now. It may need different conditions. It may need more protection, less noise, less pressure, less proving, all those things, right? Fewer demands. Just needs to be true to you. And you may need more rest without the guilt. And you may need more support and may need more time. And you may need to just stop shaming yourself for being affected by these things that were just genuinely painful and uncertain or heavy. And the spark, that spark of confidence, it isn't necessarily gone forever, but sometimes it's buried underneath everything you've had to survive. And that's where this hope for me is right now. It's not forcing myself back into that old rhythm and old narrative and old patterns, or acting like grief and loss didn't alter me. It definitely did. But the hope is in realizing that changed doesn't mean finished. It means I have to learn how to live truthfully from here on out. And so here's what I want you to take from this episode and actually apply it to your own life. That sometime today, maybe after this episode, maybe tonight when the house is quiet, maybe in the car or before you go for a walk, ask yourself where you're still expecting an old version of you to carry your current life. Where are you demanding old energy from a changed body, a changed being? Where are you forcing old goals onto a woman whose values have shifted, whose life has shifted? Where are you trying to recreate a pace that only worked because you were disconnected from yourself? Where are you calling yourself lazy, inconsistent, unmotivated, or just behind, when the more honest answer may be that you're just in a season of grieving, recovering, recalibrating, or finally becoming unwilling to live against yourself? And then ask one better question. What would support look like for the woman I am now? Not the woman everyone remembers, but for the woman you are right now, today, with the body you have, the mind that you have, breath in your lungs, and the beat of your heart for that woman, the grief that you've carried, the responsibilities in front of you, the faith you're holding on to, and the future you're still trying to believe is possible. Because maybe it looks like choosing one rhythm that helps you feel human again. Pick up that habit, pick up that routine again if it still fits. And maybe it looks like just letting yourself grieve the old version without trying to become her again, and stop forcing yourself into this new version, because this loss takes time to recover. And maybe it looks like admitting your life just can't be built on survival anymore. So let's start there. Not with a complete life overhaul that's not possible. Take off the pressure and just start with honesty, because honesty is often the first place the rebuild begins. Start with a new beginning, clean slate, whatever you want to call it. But you've got to start somewhere. And if you're listening to this and realizing you don't even know who you are underneath everything you've been carrying, I want to invite you to take 10 minutes and start with the I am enough identity reset. I created it for the woman who feels lost, exhausted, disconnected, or unsure of who she is anymore. It's a super simple process. You're not going to be asked to fix your whole life. You're just going to pause long enough to name what you've been believing, what's been weighing on your heart, and what truth you need to come back to. Because before you rebuild the life, the business, the confidence, the systems, the routines, the goals, the dreams, or any of that, you have to reconnect with the woman underneath all of it. And that's for you. And so you can download it at iamrachelbrooks.com/enough. That's iamrachelbrooks.com/enough. But before we close, I want to say this to the woman who feels lonely in who she's become. I don't have a quick fix for that. I wish I did. But I do believe that there's grace for the woman who's different. There's grace for the woman who's tired of pretending she can go back. There's grace for the woman who still has responsibilities but also needs care. And there's grace for the woman who can only tell the truth today and trust that God will meet her there. So don't make yourself wrong for being changed. Don't rush to become who you were. Don't assume the spark is gone forever just because it's been hard to feel it and see it. But sit with the woman who's here now and listen to her. Ask her what she needs. Let her be honest. Let her be supported. Let her become without dragging every survival pattern into this next season. Because you're allowed to be changed and still be called. You're allowed to be tired and still becoming. You're allowed to build a life that doesn't require you to disappear inside of it. And maybe that's where we begin again today. So until next week, take care and God bless.
Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.